Other speakers? Well, just following on from Councillor Crum, I just want to really mention the fact that this new Act, the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012, supersedes the Sale of Liquor Act 1989, which really, to my way of thinking, seems to be a very short period of time between when the new Liberalisation Act came in 1989 to the fact now that in 2012 we brought in a new Act, which I think it took about 4 years in deliberations and making. It came out as the Alcohol Reform Bill, and that was subject of submissions from Auckland Council, and really it really came from Auckland, the start of this change that from some horrific kind of happenings over alcohol, where the Law Commission did a pretty comprehensive review and came up with these changes. So, you know, and you've only got to look at the objects and purpose of this new Act, which are completely different from what was in the objects of the Sale of Liquor Act 1989. So, you know, the council, it's been devolved down to the council for us to take a far greater responsibility in the administration of the alcohol in its widest sense. And we now have district licensing committees which make the decisions as to whether licences are granted. So there's a huge responsibility now placed on the council. So the council, we heard the submissions from, as the officers say, 2,600 submissions were put in. A lot of them were on the council, from the council website, where they just filled in the details there, and there wasn't a lot of narrative in the document. But others were very extensive in what they said about the impact of alcohol and the downstream problems that alcohol causes in our community. And you know, I think some of the most telling submissions were from people at the coalface dealing with the aftermath of alcohol, overindulgence of alcohol. And I remember one medical officer who had been working in Auckland in an emergency department, but now resides in the South Island, decided to come all the way back to Auckland to make a submission, to amplify her submission in relation to the horrific, you know, problems that are caused in the early hours of the morning after people have been out drinking and overindulging in alcohol. So, you know, we've heard people from right across the region, but, you know, people who have to put up and have to put up with the downside of alcohol, especially in the Auckland city centre here. And that was one area that, you know, I think there has been some improvements over recent years, and the fact that the default hours are now 4 a.m. closing have probably had some impact on those problems from previous years. So I think that we've reached a reasonable happy medium here, and I think this is a policy that will have the desired effect in various ways, as long as we administer it as a council and all the other organisations that come into play in relation to the overall administration of the Act play their part. But it really also needs community support from across the board. So I think that there was in relation to off licences, there was I think evidence to show that from the submissions that people do want to see uniformity in the way this is administered, and, you know, to make some licences at this stage different in relation to their opening hours to others on off licences wasn't what many people wanted when you looked at the submissions. So I think, councillors, this is a good start, and it obviously now if people, as Councillor Brewer says, people want to appeal the policy, there is that safeguard with the ALA reviews or appeals. Thank you. Councillor Cashmore?
Yeah, I'd like some, with your indulgences, some concluding comments, but perhaps first...
Well, Mr Wilcox.
I was going to ask if Belinda would perhaps explain the process from here so everyone understands what can and cannot happen from this point on.
Thank you, Councillor Cashmore. Through you, Mr Chair. So if the committee decides to adopt the policy today, then we will go ahead and give public notice of that adoption, and that will be made early next week. And then from the date of public adoption, public notification, there'll be a 30-day period within which submitters on the draft local alcohol policy will be able to lodge appeals with the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority. So depending on whether or not any appeals are lodged, that will determine the next steps from there. So if appeals are lodged, then we will be in the hands of Ministry of Justice in terms of the scheduling of any appeal hearings, and those will be heard by the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority, who will determine whether an element that's appealed against, an element of the policy, they will determine whether that is considered to be reasonable in light of the object of the Act. If the ALA determines that an aspect is not reasonable in light of the object of the Act, then it will be put back to the Council to reconsider that particular element, and that will need to come back through the committee for determination. If there are no appeals, then we come back to the governing body seeking a commencement date, and then we have our final local alcohol policy coming into force at a date specified by the governing body. And there are some transitional provisions within the Act that specify that certain parts of the policy need to take longer to come into force. So any changes to trading hours, for example, need to take an additional 3 months before they can come into force to make sure that licensees have time to prepare.
Thank you. Mr Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I think first of all I'd like to echo the sentiments expressed by the other panel members to thank the staff. I mean, it's been fantastic. This was a big piece of work and there's been many hours of reading, and so I expect there's been many more hours of writing and coming to this and getting things like this, of which there are hundreds of them done. So a big thank you to you and the staff. I suppose for me, being on the panel, I came to the panel with an open mind, but having read through the submissions, there seems to be a trend, and there was evidence that backed the statements that many of the submitters were making. We read papers from Norway, the UK, Australia and New Zealand evidencing all of these, actually backing up a lot of the submissions. And also there were things within the draft that we did take out, like the single sales, because we found that that just complicated the matter, like the one-way door policy, because that once again complicated the matter. And towards the end, I was looking for simplification of the rules so that our community and our retailers and our wholesalers and our people that were in the industry, as well as those outside, could understand clearly a way forward and a way that ensured that alcohol was sold in a safer environment, minimised harm for the community. So I've been quite happy with what we've come forward with. If people aren't happy, I mean, they're quite right, they have that right to appeal to ALA, and that is their prerogative. But also I wanted a simplification because I wanted the DLCs to know where they sat when they were making decisions, and that the community could understand these decisions. So I'm quite happy with that. I've seen the evidence, read the submissions. I don't know how many I've read. I've lost track now because I've read them all, and sometimes it gets a bit boring. But I have to say that the best thing about it was understanding how everybody thought about it. This is not only a technical subject, it's also quite an emotive subject. And for all of us, alcohol has a special place, whether it's rightly or wrongly. Often many don't like alcohol, often many do, and then we have the problems that are caused by unfortunately bad consumption habits, and so that's what the purpose of this LAP is. I'm quite happy with it. I'd like to thank you, Chair, for having chaired us and guided us through this process. It wasn't easy, and often we had different ideas and different thoughts, but it was basically narrowing all these thoughts down and these to focus on what was essentially required of us from the Act. So thank you.
Councillor Brewer.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I want to congratulate the committee as well and the work that they've done as far as really improving the draft LAP as we put out for public consultation and being prepared to listen. I, for one, in my years in Newmarket, fought a proliferation of bottle stores, and as we know, we could only, under the old laws, argue around the hours of operating and the character of the applicant. And so the news of the 2012 Sale and Supply Act coming into force and its determination to minimise harm and also give local communities meaningful input was welcome relief to many, not just residential communities and groups, but also business communities too, that were sick of cheap and nasty bottle stores setting up as they did with proliferation over many of the last 20 odd years. So overall, this, from my perspective, is really heading in the right direction. And on the on-licence provisions, I'm certainly pleased that we've stuck with the default setting of 4 a.m. I think that's, I know it's not ideal from a policing point of view, but it has been a big improvement from the 24-hour licensing and all the problems it resulted, and I know that the CBD has cleaned up subsequently. I was concerned that some of our town centres that we're promoting as lively, potentially some of the metropolitan centres and places to live, work and play, were having to face under the proposed draft a 1 o'clock closing for on licences, and for places like Parnell, Takapuna, Newmarket and the likes, that was quite a tough proposition, and I thought a backward proposition. To drop that broad area B and to set it at 3 a.m. I think is a really good outcome for the community and for business, and to also focus really focus on those priority overlay areas too is a great initiative. Off licences, again, my issue is largely around whether this will in fact reduce alcohol harm, as is in the statutory intent of the legislation, and that is off licences 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And as Councillor Crum has articulated, from my personal perspective, I hope it helps, but I don't see, particularly in those well-regulated, well-lit, with a lot of community policing going on at the same time inside those supermarkets in our suburban neighbourhoods, that anyone buying alcohol before 9 a.m. and after 9 p.m. are the main problem in this country at a supermarket level. So for me, Mr. Chair, I suppose it's someone who went through university in the early 1990s and the alcohol sections were roped off on a Sunday, and you had to buy food with alcohol if you were daring to drink on a Sunday. To me, this step is a little bit back to the future. I can see the overall intent of it, but I can see that it's also an inconvenience by those busy people the mums and dads, if you like, that are going supermarket shopping before 9 a.m. or after 9 p.m. And I also see it as, I can hear the chairman of the working committee saying that, this cleans it up as far as a universal policy. It's very easily understood, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. But it's a blunt instrument, I would also argue, for those that are really good operators and that have no blemishes on their licences. And perhaps if we'd put the 8 a.m. to 10 p.m, those good operators could operate at those hours, and the local impact reports and licence renewal process might have made it more restricted for any of those operators that had blemishes on their record. So, Mr. Chairman, I think this is a really, really positive step forward from where it was. I would like to support it in its entirety. I don't know if the recommendations allow for us to start picking it to bits, but I do have reservations that we are picking on the off licences who have got exemplary records, and their customers, who I believe, many of which are not the problem that we're trying to solve here. And so I hope that we can see the statistics starting to improve when we start roping off our supermarkets at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning and after 9 o'clock at night. But I fear that is more around being seen to do something other than actually having an impact and actually delivering on the Sale and Supply Alcohol Act's statutory purpose, which was around harm minimisation. But I hope that certainly works. Just finally, Mr. Chair, another blunt instrument I see is the 2-year freeze. I understand, and a lot of work's been done on identifying the priority overlay areas, but a 2-year freeze for licences in the city centre, particularly off licences. And I know that buying alcohol from a decent bottle store from a bad bottle store doesn't necessarily result in a different effect, but I just see that as, again, a very blunt instrument that if we're trying to develop in and around the waterfront, building apartments, building a hotel, and a really smart boutique wine shop selling Central Otago Pinot Noir has to wait out the freeze, then that seems a blunt instrument when I know that the target is probably more around containing the proliferation of the dozen bottle stores that we've seen up on Karangahape Road in the last 20 years. So again, the 2-year freeze in the centre city is a blunt instrument, but I hope it does certainly help with the intent of the Act. Thank you.